Our speaker today is Adam Loomberg. He is the president of Postal Advocate, the only mail audit and recovery firm in the U.S. and Canada. We manage a portfolio of 128,000 pieces of mailing equipment for the largest U.S. companies. Adam speaks and teaches nationally on mail savings and industry trends. He's a former industry co-chair of the Boston Postal Customer Council and Mail Systems Management Association, and he has a CMDSS and MDC certifications. Adam is a featured writer for Mailing Systems Technology magazine, and he worked for one of the largest mailing vendors for over 17 years as the director of national sales for Presort tabletop inserters, addressing hardware and software and green offerings. And he was one of the top 5 account managers nationally, working with some of the largest accounts. Over to you, Adam.
Thanks, Michaela. So today we're going to talk about the top 10 ways to save on outsourced print and mail. And what we're going to cover is how do you gain visibility to this spend? This is actually one of the bigger challenges. It might not sound it, but we'll go through why. How do you audit these invoices to make sure you're paying the right levels? How do you benchmark services against each other? So if you're using multiple providers, how do you sort of think about where you're getting the best rates? What are the options around consolidating this spend to get better rates overall? Making the right outsource and insource decisions. What are some drivers that you may want to think about? Running an RFP for comparing services, and it might not be a request for proposal, it might be a request for quote, so you can figure out if you're getting the best rates. Printing closer to the end user is going to be very important in the future as the USPS slows down mail service, so we'll talk about that. Expanding the outsource providers' use to other areas. What other things could they potentially do that could be helpful? Managing your own agreements. How do you manage your own agreements on a go-forward basis? And then setting up a continual review process to optimize what you're doing with these outsourced providers. And we feel these are the top 10 ways to drive costs down. In the United States, most production mail is processed through an outsourcer who has the staff, equipment, and expertise. And this outsource happens for the following reasons. So used to be that a lot of people used to do mail in-house. There were huge production facilities everywhere, and people were sort of running their own in-plant operations. There's less and less of that that's happening because, first off, the post office rules got more difficult for automation discounts. The software you needed to get IMB barcodes and automation software, e-induction services, it just became where people used to do small batch mailings to try to get these automation discounts, and then frankly it just got too complicated. And so people who have really big production volumes can still do it in-house, but the smaller group that's doing it, we just see much less frequently. There's less expertise internally in most organizations around mail. A lot of people who are in the mail industry, frankly, retired over the last 10 years. And there's not the same group of people that are coming up through organizations with mail backgrounds. There's also improved levels of automation. So what the outsourced providers can buy for what their equipment can do can in many cases be much better than you could ever have in your own office. That they can run multiple shifts, and they have data analytics tools, and they have software and relationships that can get better discounts than you could get on your own. And it's a great practice to capitalize on some of their infrastructure. The key issues with this is outsourced print and mail is one of the least understood categories, has some of the lowest levels of visibility. Like very few companies that we work with, when we ask how are you doing this outsourced mail, have any decent visibility to who they're using, what they're spending, and benchmarking it against other providers. And we find it's one of the highest opportunities for companies to overspend. And we'll go through more reasons why. So why should you care about this? So one of the biggest reasons you should care about this is postage. Postage costs are going up at the highest levels that we've seen in decades. So in August 29th of this year, the post office had its largest rate increase in over 10 years. And you could see the numbers of the previous rate increases. So if we look at the 8/29/2001, outsourced mail is primarily in these automation classes. First class mail automation letters, 8% increase. First class mail auto flats, 17% increase. Marketing mail letters, 8%. Marketing mail flats, 9%. Those were some of the largest increases that we have seen. The post office just proposed another rate increase for July 10th, and these are the numbers that these are proposed. They're not final yet. We'll have the final numbers shortly, and we'll do a webinar discussing what the impact is on each class. but from what they've initially proposed, it's 7 to 13% increases. What that means is that over a 12-month period, your postage costs, which is the largest single spend area of outsourced print and mail, is going up 14 to 30%, which is an incredible increase for one calendar year. The post office has also announced that they're going to start having 2 rate increases per year to manage their, basically needs. And they're doing this because there are basically more delivery points that need to be delivered to, with higher costs for healthcare and labor, and with less mail volumes that's being given to them. And so they have to be able to manage costs and stay profitable. And so just like UPS and FedEx are having large increases, the post office is saying we're going to follow suit and do the same thing. But this is a reason why it's becoming more important for people to look at their outsourced mail spends, which is probably their biggest postage spend area, and see, are there ways, are they optimizing the way they're doing it? Are there any cost savings they can get because they're getting hit with these rate increases, whether they like it or not? So the key challenges with outsourced print and mail service is typically a lack of visibility. So these are the 4 areas that we find in most companies. Lack of visibility. There's no visibility to the bills and the contracts in which are driving these arrangements. Variability in rates that are paid for services for fees and postage. So if they use multiple providers, there's huge variability. Outsourced print and mail is the Wild West. There is no place you can go on the internet and see what this stuff is supposed to cost. Everything is job specific. There's lots of different fees and different services you have to pay for inside a specific print and mail job. And very few clients do any sort of formal comparison between services to know exactly the rates they're getting. That's why I call it the Wild West. And the rates that they charge will fluctuate, where you'd see one client paying 10 cents a piece for a certain type of work, and another client spending 25 cents a piece for a similar type of work, because it's just the way it's being handled. There's inconsistency in the level of detail provided on invoices. Some invoices break it all down nicely. Some invoices, basically give you a holistic amount, and it's your job if you want to get the details of what's happening. And oftentimes the people that are managing these agreements have a lack of knowledge to give them any leverage with these suppliers. So gaining visibility, we think, is the most important thing. There's limited visibility we find to what services we're using, the cost of projects that were being outsourced, the breakout detail which is driving. This happens because usually it's fragmented. There isn't one person in an organization who's managing the spend holistically. It's usually managed by department. And so an example is accounts receivable. Maybe they're managing the statement bill, the invoices and the statements. Marketing is managing their own projects that might be done internally or through a third-party consolidator marketing agency. Customer service may be doing some mailings. Human resources. We work with lots of huge companies that might have different business units as well, and they may be doing their own things inside each individual business unit or area. So one of the objectives is to have a sort of central repository of this for your organization, of what is being spent throughout these departments, so there can be some central control and expertise to it. So our process to gain visibility, and this is what we do with all of our clients, is we start with accounts payable, because our first goal is to figure out what services are being used today. And there's hundreds, if not thousands, of different outsourced print and mail service providers. So it's not like there's just a database list and we can say do a search by these lists. But most outsourced print and mail suppliers are going to require that you set up a United States postal permit to fund the postage for those mailings. So what we ask our clients to do is to start out with is run an export from your business system of all the places, of all the transactions in which you spent money to the United States Postal Service, Postmaster, Post Office. People code the post office names differently, because that's where they'd be funding postage for these types of mailings. We reach out to the largest departments to see what service providers they may be using: accounts receivable, marketing, customer service. We get copies of invoices to see the detail on what's being charged. We reach out to the vendors to see if they have web portals that can provide more detail. Oftentimes these vendors will have a place where they can give you a username and password, and you can log in and see the details of your particular mailings. And then we'll work directly with procurement to see if there are contracts in place with these vendors at defined rates. Those contracts are going to be key, as we'll go to in a minute, to sort of dive into what is the agreement best in class, and are you maximizing that agreement? So once we have that detail, we set up a process to be able to code every line item from an invoice to one of these categories. So these mailing categories make up everything that someone would do with print and mail outsourced services. So is it material, data processing, the cost to receive data files, turn it into its final version, mail automation. So what are they doing? What postal software are they using? And, and what are they charging to get, you the maximum discounts? Printing, mail preparation, folding, inserting, tabbing, and jetting, postage. Are they charging you for documents that are being emailed to the clients versus being sent? Is there transportation cost to move mail closer to its final destination or to pick up things? Data storage, we'll go into a lot more on data storage because this is a big cost element, and then miscellaneous items. But these are the items that make up your mailings. And so what we developed a system is coding these from these mailing categories and then creating subcategories so we can compare one service provider to another, one job to another, to make sure that there's order into what people are paying for these things. So first thing is gain access to the fee level detail for all invoices, log each line to one of these categories, maintain the data over periods of time to be able to compare vendors and services, and benchmark the rates to use for further negotiation and vendor selection. But by having this type of process, although it seems arduous, it makes it much easier to make sure that there's control around what's being done. Audit your invoice. It's essential that you understand the contracts you have in place with your vendors. Not only the rates you should be charged, but there's usually other items that can make a big difference in the total cost of what you're spending. Things like rebates, like if you do a certain volume, do you get money back at the end of the year? Minimum quantity commitments. If you don't print a certain amount of documents, are you going to get a fee that you're going to have to pay at the end of the year because you didn't give enough quantity to the outsource provider? And outsource providers have these types of things built into their agreements. Is there tiered pricing levels that if you get over certain thresholds, the next group or the following quarter will be reduced prices? Quality and turnaround time guarantees. Like, if pieces didn't get sent out in time, or if there was issues with the quality of the material, are you entitled to some sort of refund? Items not getting the contracted rate. Like what happens if you're billed 15 cents for an item that your contract rate is 10 cents? Is anyone looking at that to get those refunds? And so by auditing invoices, you can manage these aspects and they can make a big difference in your costs. Invoice Detail. So this is one client that we have, and they use three different outsource providers. Two of the outsource providers, these are invoices from them. The one on the left basically just groups them by total and says, you're going to pay us $127,000 for the work that we did last month, and this is the detail, and there's really no detail. The other one breaks it down by job, by service. So they break out the print, and they break out the document preparation, and they break out the, what type of job and what type of service was it at specific fees, so it can be managed. If you have people that are giving you by job or this sort of like holistic bill like you see on the left, it's really important to gain access to a vendor portal or force the vendor to give you reports that provide the granularity. You shouldn't just accept a bill for $127,000 without the level of detail on the right. Every vendor provides a different level of detail on their invoices. So it's important to make sure that it can be broken down like you see on the level on the left, on the right. If it's not on the invoice, request detail on a web portal or email backup detailed reports that can give you the detail you need so you can make sure that it can be managed, because obviously this job on the left can't be managed. Benchmarks your services. Now that the data is resident in one place, you can compare the rates for the core services in a standard way. And we talked about these categories. This will determine if there's a need to work with your current providers to get better rates or consider lower price services. So now that we have all of these categories, we can look at one job to another to say, what were we paying in mail automation, printing, postage, and we can look at them and say, okay, well, that doesn't make any sense. We should really be going back to vendor A and saying, you're either going to give us better pricing or we're going to look at switching this to another vendor. Service fee variability. So you'll find a huge variation of what's charged from one service provider to another. And these are the factors that we have found have the greatest impact in that. Was the job put out to bid, or was it an add-on project to an existing provider? Does the vendor have a master service agreement for continual work at specific rates? Oftentimes those master service agreements aren't set up. There was just a job that they got a quote for and they keep doing it, and then any additional job is just sort of an add-on at whatever rates they want to charge. What's the quantity and frequency of that mailing? Obviously, the greater quantity and frequency, the lower the rate should be. What are the data processing charges that are being added? What type of stock for paper and envelopes is being used? How is it printed? What type of technology was being used? Color, black and white, roll fed, print fed. How is the piece prepared, and could it be automated, or was there handwork or high levels of personalization that were required? How was it mailed? What level of postal automation was used? Were third-party services used for things like pre-sorting, mail forwarding, shipping? And what was needed from the data besides mailing? Like, did they have to email, text, fax? Was there data storage, web presentment? So because of the difficulties in comparing jobs, most organizations have little control or knowledge of what rates they should be paying for all these things. And that's the reason that we strongly encourage people to set up a system to standardize this. Consolidate your mail spends wherever possible. So we'll go to companies that are spending, that are using 10 different outsource providers, and we'll say, look, if we can run an RFP for this, we can get maybe this down to 1 to 3 different providers. It will give us leverage for a couple of reasons. Most mail that goes through an outsource providers is either first-class pre-sort or marketing mail. And you can see the volumes keep going down every year. There was, in 2009, there was 47 million pieces of first-class mail. Now there's 35 million. In marketing mail, there was 83 billion pieces. Excuse me, these are in the billions. And now there's 66 billion pieces. So you look at that and you say, there's the same number of companies in these spaces. They're trying to survive on fewer pieces of mail. So it puts you in the driver's seat to have leverage if you can come to them with more mail volume. It's one of the few categories where the client is actually in the driver's seat in determining rates, because the vendors need your business because they're working off a smaller pie of mail. Optimize your insource and outsource decisions. In most organizations, mail is a mix. There's some stuff done in-house and there's some stuff done outside. But oftentimes it's based on, well, we've always done it this way. So some things to think about, and these aren't universal, but these are just ways to sort of think about it. Most large jobs will end up being less expensive to do outside due to economies of scale. Outsource providers can run multiple shifts. They can utilize equipment for multiple customers. They have higher levels of expertise, and they can better utilize their equipment. And in theory, those rates can be passed on to you without having to tie up space for smaller volumes. There could be smaller, more complex jobs that are being outsourced that may make sense to do in-house as well. Like if there's high levels of personalization and you're paying huge rates for staff, it might make sense for you to take control of it. There are new digital print drivers that can help organizations control where they print their documents, moving specific mail to internal production facilities or others to outsource print providers. So the two options are, you either use these print drivers and you move mail to an on-site production facility. So instead of mailing from 50 locations throughout a company, maybe you say, look, we want to optimize our print and we want to have it printed all in one site that has the right inserting technologies and software and pre-sort services, in-house. Or maybe it's the same story, but I don't want to have that internal facility. I want to have it outsourced. There's new technology that's available that can control that. And one of the biggest issues that outsource providers have is they don't want to take small, mid-sized jobs because they have to set up their equipment to run those. So what these digital drivers do, these print drivers do, that I'll explain how they work in a sec, is they allow you to basically induct smaller mid-sized mailings directly into the outsource provider or directly into the in-house print facility, because they standardize the way pieces are done. What I mean by that is they accept a certain type of document that is in a certain format. They use a double window envelope or a large window envelope to assure that the addresses always show up. The return address shows through one window and the destination address shows through another. And they basically can induct your mail and they can print, ABC company next to BCG company, and all in one print flow. So the way these print drivers work is you have a document that you're working with, and basically you would go to file print, and instead of you printing to a local printer, there'd be a pop-up that says on-demand print driver. and your document would show up in a new window and it'd say, okay, where's the address and what's the unique item that changes between sets? And then there might be some slight movement of documents or lining up to get the addresses to show up. And then basically it prints and you say where it prints, and do you want to print in color or black and white? And you're basically keying the job of how you need it set up, and it's very simple to do. And then you can control where those documents print. So this is the newest trend of printing, and it allows you to be able to get smaller jobs off the local office doing it, and get it into the hands of either an outsourcer or a production facility in-house. You can also do different things, like you can add extra documents, you can control if they're emailed or printed or faxed, you can do certified, you can put certified mail cover letters with these, on the fly. So there's a lot of flexibility you have with these types of tools. We recommend that you run an RFP comparing service providers to find if you're getting the best rates and service levels for your mailings. So we've built templates that make this easy. You should certainly have your own template that makes it easy for you to get the inputs from the different vendors and compare them side by side on standardized metrics. You want to, like I said, with this decline in mail volume, you're in much more of the driver's seat in getting vendors to be hungry for your business, which is exactly what you want. There are things that you need to look for in selecting vendors that are important. Vendors should meet the following criteria. They can support your customer's geographic area at the lowest cost. If mail is local, you want to find local or regional providers in your area that can support it. If mail is nationwide, look for providers in the middle of the country or desirable postal hubs that can reach the majority of the country in 2 to 3 days. More on this in another slide or two, because it's a very important point. Is there a major pre-sort center that's close by? A lot of mail that outsourcers do, especially if it's you want to make sure that they have the ability, because they can't pre-sort everything down to the lowest rates, that they have agreements with major pre-sort services where they can get discounts on those additional pieces, that they're in a low cost of living area and can pass those savings rates. It's amazing to me how many mail houses are in the New York City area, Boston area, San Francisco, Los Angeles. These are some of the highest cost of living areas in the country where we're printing. Well, we have to pay much higher. Minimum wage in Massachusetts is $15 an hour. People working on this type of equipment are probably making $20 to $25 an hour, in these higher rent areas. Compare that to what someone's doing in Ohio or in central parts of the country, or that might be minimum wage might be $8 or $9 an hour, and they might be paying 12 or 15. This is a very labor heavy industry. If you're producing in the highest cost areas, you're paying for it in your rates. Have the highest level of technology to support your needs. There's big differences in what small, like mom and pop shops have versus like the big boys, what they have for like equipment. And that could be things like, as an example, like the bigger shops may have the ability to like manifest your items, commingle them with other providers, with other mailings to get better postage discounts. They may have the ability to create envelopes online as they're printing as they're folding and inserting the document. So envelopes can be customized and done on the fly. There might be different levels of personalization to match the document and a closed envelope that smaller providers wouldn't have. That they specialize in the main classes of mail in your industry. As an example, bank statements. There are certain outsourced providers who focus on statement mail. There are certain that focus on marketing mail, and that's what they do. And they're focused on big runs cross country. That they have value-added services that you need. That they can do things. They can do extra work around your mailings that meets your requirements. You want to compare the responders, request references. References are very important, and you want to ask for their account management processes for customer service and issue resolution. So if you're having this type of agreement with a client, you want to partner with this company, and that means you're going to be dealing with the customer service rep on a frequent basis, working on like last minute deadlines, changes, invoice pulls, exceptions, things that need to happen. You want to make sure that there's a team to support you there. And look for discounts by consolidating higher volume mail into fewer suppliers, as we talked about. So, excuse me one sec. Printing closer to the end user is going to become much more important. Paying attention to where you're mailing things didn't used to be such a huge issue. It was going to get anywhere, first class was going to get anywhere in the country in 2 to 3 days. Well, the post office on October 1st, 2021 announced that mail is slowing from 1 to 3 days to 1 to 5 days. And that's the expected delivery. That doesn't mean every piece of mail meets that delivery objective. So there could be pieces going to more rural areas that are taking much longer to get delivered. And I'm sure some of you have seen that in your travels. So the reason this is happening is the USPS wants to reduce their dependency on third-party air couriers that are expensive and they say make planning difficult. But really it's that they want to take the cost out of air couriers and they want to move more of their mail to truck delivery and ground service. So that's great for them, lowering costs. It's not great for you on a delivery perspective. So again, think about your mail for a sec. If you're sending national mail, do you really want to produce everything in New York? If stuff is going all the way across country? Like a better strategy might be to look at having either someone in the Midwest or to have potentially some of the larger providers have multiple facilities and splitting up the mail. So some stuff's produced on the East Coast, some stuff's on the West Coast, and some in the middle to optimize these mail objectives. If you're sending regional or local mail, you certainly want to use providers that are resident in your area. For marketing mail, it's very important what percentage of mail is drop shipped to take advantage of destination entry discounts, which make a big difference in cost. It saves about 2 to 3 cents per piece by getting pieces to move to the sectional center facility, and you want to make sure that you're taking advantage of that. Expand use to other areas. So outsourced print and mail providers are able to supply additional value-added services. So here's some examples of things that they're known to do. Some of them like have a pre-sort service that is linked to the outsourced provider, or they could do they could pick up your mail daily and do metering for you. Some of them will be able to not just print and mail your items, they could do email, text, and fax management for multi-channel projects. They can do data storage and web presentment. Example would be managing all your data on your clients, for your clients as they access their invoices on your portal. So as they're printing the documents, they can also take a PDF and store each individual image and then make those images available to you so you could use them in your online system or even manage your online system. And then there's fulfillment and shipping if you have items that need to be kitted and shipped. Manage your own agreements with continual review. So once the new service providers and rates are in place, it's important to set up a process for managing this relationship. So these are the things that we recommend. So make sure there's vendor portal access to all mailings. You should have the ability to be able to pull out whether it's invoices, counts, quantities, jobs, and be able to access the details of your mailings yourself to control what you're doing. You need to make sure you have visibility to all invoices. They should be stored in one repository or made available to you in a certain way. There should be an audit process to look for bill errors where you can get refunds, service failures where contract refunds are available, expense areas above documented thresholds so you can work towards reductions. You should be budgeting around postage increases, and not just budgeting around the postage increases, making sure that when there is a postage increase, that you're just paying for the postage increase and that you're not, and that the mail service isn't profiting off additional pieces of that rate increase that you may, because they're sort of hiding the difference of the savings versus what they're actually paying. When there's a rate increase, my position is that the outsourced services should be passing to you the same savings as they were getting before. They shouldn't be making extra profit off your mail just because they could work a rate increase. Contract compliance for rebates and penalties need to be managed. You want to make sure that you're controlling those things so you're maximizing the rates you're paying. There should be a quarterly review process that defines the changes and new strategies for the future and ongoing meetings to move enhancements forward, whether it's new jobs, new process projects, merging other services. It's a continual flow. Now, inside outsourced mailings, there's 3 areas that we find the largest areas of savings opportunities: postage, printing, and image creation and storage and presentment. So I'm just going to talk about these 3 really briefly so you get a sense of what things to look for. So if you're not an expert on postal discounting, I just want to give you like some basic nuts and bolts to make it simple and explain like how to sort of think about it. First class mail, a single piece first class mail that you're metering in your office is 53 cents. If you use an outsourced provider, they're going to have automation software that's going to sort it down to higher levels to get you rates of 42.6 to 48.5, as you can see here. The way that that rate is determined, sorry if this is too basic for some, but it's looking at your mailing. If you have 1 million pieces of mail, do you have 150 pieces going to a 5-digit zip code, like 90210, like the show? If you have 150 pieces going to a specific 5-digit zip code, you get the 5-digit rate, 426. If you don't have 150 pieces going to that 5-digit zip code, do you have 150 pieces going to a schematic of a few different 3-digit zip codes, like 902, 904, 908? So those would get an AADC, Automated Area Distribution Center, rate of 46.1, and then every other piece in an automation mailing gets the 48.5 rate. So the goal is to have as much density as you can possibly have. And not all, your mailing might not be big enough that it has density, which is important that the mail house is basically sorting it to the deepest levels, but the items that are going at mixed AADC or potentially AADC, maybe those go through a pre-sort service to get better discounts. Marketing mail works in the same way, except there are extra ways to save money. So you can see 5-digit AADC, mixed AADC, all here, and those work in the same way. There's also something called destination entry discounts, and destination entry discounts means if you drop ship your mail from the mail house directly to the local sectional center facility that's accepting it, you can save 2.7 cents. The rate goes from 27.7 to 25 cents by just drop shipping it. The post office is giving you a discount for moving mail closer to the final end user, and so they don't have to do the transport. Also, if you have such a high density that you can meet requirements for having a certain number of pieces on a particular carrier route. So think of the local postman who delivers your mail. If he has, 20, or I don't know the exact criteria for carrier route, but if he has a certain amount of pieces on his walking route that are for your mailing, you can qualify for carrier route rates. And carrier route rates you can see are even less, and they still qualify for the destination entry. So that's how people save money in postage. That's it. That's the way it works. The methods in which people get these savings vary by service. Is there a third-party pre-sort service that's being used? Is there in-house software where they're processing these mailings one at a time? So they take your 10,000 pieces and they run that job, and then they run your next job that has 8,000 pieces and they pre-sort that. Versus, do they have in-house software that commingles multiple jobs together where they can utilize all of their clients' volumes in order to get better discounts? And that's going to have much higher discounts for you to be able to get. Marketing mail third-party forwarding services, like what forwarding services are they using and what percentage of their mail is getting forwarded to the sectional center facility so they can get these discounts. And if it's a large enough organization, they may have their own internal transportation department that's managing this forwarding that can give you all their stats. But these are the important questions to be asking and thinking about. Printing. It's the next biggest cost area. What technology are they using can have a big impact. Are they using cut sheet, roll feed, laser, inkjet, color, or monochrome? All those things are going to have a big impact on the cost of print. What print suppression is being used, like what coordination is done so certain documents are emailed or web presentment. Can jobs be presented together versus independent jobs? Are discounts offered for duplexing, printing on front and back, versus the single image rate? And new virtual printers can allow you to send jobs from the user's desktops for a continuous workflow. We talked about that. One thing that's important is usually there's going to be a single piece, single image rate. There's a per image rate, and then is an additional image rate. So it's important to see that that additional image rate should be at a much lower rate than the initial image. Because if you have multiple pages, it's easier for them to process those multiple images than it is for the first image. Data management. Data management is a huge cost component of mailings, and very few people look at this. So data management is accepting data files, formatting the data files to the vendor's workflow, formatting the documents with your customer logic, mail automation, so working through the USPS requirements, managing email, fax, texting of your documents, image creation and storage of your files, and then web presentment. So I'm going to focus on the last two for a second. I just want to give you a quick client example. This is one of our clients. We did an audit on their invoices, and they were spending 0.004 to create backup images of every printed page. And then they were paying 0.004 per image per month for every stored image, and they were storing images for 24 months before they disposed of the images. And they've been doing this for 5 years, and they had 3.6 million images stored. So this client was only sending 75,000 invoices a month. It wasn't a huge application, which is 150,000 images because there was front and back. They were being charged $600 a month on image creation and $14,000 to store those images every month. Annual cost was $180,000, but worse, it was 20 cents per piece for every new invoice mailed was the cost that they were allocating. So we bid this, made sure that there was management of this, cut the storage time from 24 months to 18 months, and it reduced their costs from $180,000 to about $37,000 a year, saving $133,000 just on this one line item on their invoices. So image storage and image creation and storage and web presentment can be big cost components in your bills. It's important to understand them. Marketing agencies and consolidators. So there's a trend to use these marketing agencies, and they want to say, well, look, we have relations with a huge number of outsourced mail providers. We can give you the best rates, and you don't have to worry about anything, and we'll take care of the creative, and then we'll coordinate the actual production, which is great from the concept of you being able to walk away from it and having someone else take care of it. But if you're big enough, that might not be a great strategy around costs. So the issue is, are you getting the best rates? Are you getting any economies of scales? Are they splitting the work amongst multiple providers? Do you have any control over these mailings? Typically, people in these types of environments have no control because they're not the customer. The customer is the marketing agency. Do you have any visibility to the fees, or is it aggregated on summary bills? It's usually going to be summarized. Are you assured you're getting the best services available? So let me just give you an example of a client that we're just starting to work with. They're a huge volume mailer, and they're doing a couple 100 million pieces a year of marketing work. And they're using one of these marketing consolidators. Actually, they're using two different marketing consolidators who's taking care of this. They have no visibility to any of the costs of any of the printer production. And when we looked at what services these marketing agencies are using, they're splitting the work into 12 different providers to do the print and mail, many of which are in the most expensive cost of living areas of the country. And so we're about to start an analysis of this to look to say, can we get some economies of scale and have pricing on a national agreement in their name, and they let the marketing agencies do what they're good at, which is marketing, and they control the print production on their own contract. Think of it like if you send out UPS and FedEx, which most of you have UPS and FedEx contracts, oftentimes when you have someone who's sending a vendor who's sending lots of stuff out for you or into you, you give them your UPS or FedEx number so you get your discount and they don't mark it up. In this situation, that's not what's happening. These agencies are using their own programs, and you're not getting any leverage from it. So, best in class, combine mailings under one agreement so you can be assured you're mailing at the lowest rates. You can customize the service to what's needed. You get higher levels of vendor support, and larger mailers have higher level of automation and can provide lower postage costs. This company isn't even using some of the best outsourced providers, in order to manage these. Summary. Gain visibility to your outsourced mailings. It's the most important step. Audit the invoices and benchmark the service levels and fees. Make sure you have visibility and control of what you're supposed to be having and what it is you're paying. Look for savings across all areas of spend. You never know where the savings are going to come through. Run an RFP to develop a master service agreement with fewer suppliers. It could be as little as one, but there's no reason that you should have 10 or 15 or 20 different providers that you're using throughout the country. Set up a continual review to further optimize the category and record your results through your managed program. The savings are going to be larger than you expect through this type of management and oversight. So we run these types of educational webinars because we think that there's a gap of the education available in the industry to understand what things people even need to think about to properly optimize what they're doing. If you need help, this is what we do. We manage the largest mail equipment and postage portfolios for some of the biggest companies in America. We have saved our clients $73 million in mail spends. We manage the largest fleet of equipment and postage. Our average client has saved almost $2 million. Equipment savings is where we got our start, and we average 56% savings on the equipment side. But on top of that, we're managing, multiple postage and outsource programs for clients. And we've also recovered $27 million in lost postage, vendor overcharges, and fees. We work with 8 of the top 15 banks, 3 of the top 10 communications companies, telecommunications companies. Frankly, it doesn't make any difference what industry someone's in. It just matters that someone is large and has disparate mail spends. We typically will do an analysis at no cost for clients, where we need very simple data that people can usually pretty easily provide. And then we'll come back, do the analysis, and quantify exactly what savings we believe are available. And then if you decide you want to move forward, then we'll implement the changes and help implement the project. We present all savings to you to get your approvals. We don't implement anything without your approvals on it. We manage all of your spends in a web-based dashboard to provide the visibility that's required to manage these categories. And that's the biggest reason. It's not that people make bad decisions. People just don't have the data in a format that's workable to be able to make those good decisions. And we provide ongoing support. Usually our agreements are, people can get out of them, but they're usually for multiple years because they're going to have continual things coming up over and over again in the future, and they need their data managed. I want to open it up to any questions. I want to thank you for coming for this. We're going to be having another webinar that we'll send you an invite to over the next probably 30 days that's going to talk about the rate increase that's going to happen in July, and that will give all the details to it as soon as those rates are finalized. So we'll send you all out an invitation to that, as well as continual other educational forums that we're running, and we hope this sort of format is helpful. So I want to open it up for any questions.
Thanks, Adam. Hello, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And like Adam said, if you guys have any questions, definitely either raise your hand or type them in the chat box and we'll answer them. And then I want to point to our social icons there so you can follow us. We post there on a more frequent basis than we do have webinars. So we give out helpful tips and stuff like that. So our first question is, what should we do if we get a bill from our vendor without any details regarding what the charges are for?
What I would recommend is, first off, go to the vendor and ask, is there a web portal where we can pull out the details of our specific jobs? And if there isn't, then I would require the vendor to give you the detail of the specifics of that job before it gets paid. As you can see from that example, there's no excuse for a vendor just giving you a huge bill and expecting you to pay it without the backup detail to support it.
Okay, and we have another one. Why do you think we are seeing so many rate increases?
I think the post office is realize is a couple different things. One is UPS and FedEx have been raising their rates sort of at these levels on an annual basis, where the post office hasn't. They've been sort of stuck in these rules of only increasing rates at the consumer price index, which for a while was only 1% to 2%. So they were sort of handcuffed from raising rates. With the new Postmaster General in place, who's from industry, new rules that have been allowed by Congress for the post office to have more control over their rates to be profitable, I think that, and inflation that has been at the 6% increase, 7% per year. I think the post office has a lot of ability now to raise rates and to make them profitable. We've all been hearing, for years, the post office is losing this money and that money. I think the post office is finally in a position where they're saying, look, you're giving us less mail, you're giving us more points that we have to deliver. We're going to make ourselves profitable. And you can see from the volumes that as they raise rates, declines in mail volumes doesn't really happen. It's relatively inelastic. So if they raised rates 10 cents a piece or 20 cents a piece, we'd all be mortified and it would make the news for, a month. And then people would forget about it and keep doing the same things that they were doing. So I think that the post office knows that, and they have a lot of control to keep raising rates to make sure that they can maintain profitability, which they have not been doing.
Okay.
One last thing. One last quick thing for anyone who's a total mail nerd like I am. The post office used to have a requirement that they had to fund pensions for employees that were also in the military, and there was this huge pension funding that went away. So the post office, you'll start seeing being more profitable and having less loss on a year by year basis in the future, but they're still using whatever rate concessions that they have available to them to raise rates at the highest levels. Sorry, I know a little bit of a tangent, but I just want to make sure that point got made.
All right, and we have another question. What if we just signed a contract with a mail house? How can we still save money?
So even if you even if you've recently signed a contract, it's still important to manage that vendor relationship to make sure that there's an audit on the bills, if there's, if you're getting refunds or if there's criteria about where you can get money back through those contracts, that those are managed. And then also, even if you just signed a contract for them, there could be other jobs throughout other, parts of the business. And the question is, could those jobs get merged into the main mail contract? And would that be a savings or not a savings?
All right, and it also looks like we have, other than some questions, we have a few comments that Mark typed, which was very helpful. He said these CRRT discounts are only offered for marketing mail and are dependent on the percentages of the routes covered delivered to versus pieces count threshold based as the automation rates are. Adam, do you want to touch on that before I read the other comments?
Can you just say the beginning part again?
Yes, these CRRT discounts are only offered for marketing mail and are dependent on the percentages of the routes covered delivered to versus piece count threshold based as the automation rates are.
Sure. So I think what he's referring to is the carrier rate discounts that we were sort of alluding to, that there's different criteria that are set up for those, and those are all marketing mail based. So the carrier route is not for first class. Just want to make sure that part's clear. So Mark, thank you for that extra feedback on that.
And he also said on CRRT, be careful of the basic rates as they are higher than the automation rates.
Right, so he's saying that in some cases it may make sense, even if at the very base level of carrier route, it might be more advantageous to do it through just the standard automation.
Yes, and then there's one last comment from Mark. We appreciate. With saturation mailings, you can mail to every address on a carrier route or pick and choose. However, you have to mail to either 1, 75% of the entire carrier route, or 2, 90% of the residential addresses on the carrier route. You can leave out a certain demographic as long as you follow the 75 to 90 rule.
Thank you, Mark. That's really helpful.
All righty. Well, if we don't have any further questions, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Please fill out the survey that will appear at the conclusion of the webinar, and be sure to check out our social media pages to find helpful information from us on a more frequent basis. Have a great rest of your day.